a dream but feel stuck, if you are facing obstacles that seem overwhelming, or if you just need a dose of motivation to keep pushing forward, then you are in the right place. So buckle up, dreamers. Anchor Your Dreams is not just a podcast, it's a community of dreamers supporting dreamers, women supporting women. Subscribe, follow along, and let's navigate the seas of ambition together. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered. The journey begins now.
So I've
Nice
done a
to
really
see you.
stellar move this morning, and I left my work bag at home and didn't realize it till I got here. So I'm on my cell phone.
Oh, that's okay. That's
I was
totally
laughing at
fine.
myself. I'm like, how does one who does virtual counseling forget a computer at home? I thought I was really light leaving the house. Anyways, here I am now.
I'm actually, it's funny. I'm in my room right now because my daughter is home. So this is my sort of makeshift little podcast space. So I'm sitting on
That's
my
all
bed. So
good.
if you see me shifting a bit, it's just because I'm trying to get a little comfortable and I might have a cramp in a leg or something.
All good. My office for years was in the corner of my bedroom with like a table and a chair. People are like, what a lovely office. I'm like, thank you. Looking at my disaster of a room, like,
Right? I've thought about doing that in my room. I have like enough space in a corner to set up a desk so that if I have my computer on, you would just see a wall as well behind me. Today, I'm here with Colleen Franklin of Sandstone Counseling. She is a registered clinical counselor. Welcome, Colleen. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
thanks.
So, I'd love to just get into, before we get into your expertise, if we can just get into a little bit about your journey and what it's been like to get to where you are today.
Yeah, I was reflecting on that story and or that idea, and I was trying to think like, well, what got me here today? Because I didn't set out saying I'm going to be this private practice owner. I always thought that I would, work for the government, child and youth mental health or something. I think like, I don't know, how far back do you want me to go in this thought process?
Wherever your heart takes you, you had an interview for an internship, and that kind of was a pivotal moment for you. So if you want to start there, or if you want to go back to your schooling, like wherever your heart takes
I
you.
think, what sort of touched on like me being like getting to where I am is I have a learning disability. I'm dyslexic. And so I think my educational journey was very difficult when I was young. Definitely wasn't super confident in my learning. I repeated a grade in grade one, which thank God they don't do that anymore because that was a difficult thing as a little person. And I think that sort of has shaped me to be throughout the course of my life. It was challenging. And then I got to this place as an older teen where I kind of started to get confidence and go, oh, I think I figured out how to learn what I need to learn. Like I know how I learn and I know how to seek what I need. And then I did my degree and I was like, I'm never going back to school. That's good. I've got my degree. I'm happy with that. I'm never going back to school. And that was a challenge too. I think I really struggled in a few classes, failed a few to start with. Like it took me a while to get momentum again, to build that confidence. And again, I figured out, okay, what do I need to do? Like I have really good determination, I think, because of my challenges. And so I always end up coming back going, oh, what do I need to figure out to get where I need to be? And so I've kind of figured that out, got my degree, had some kids, and then decided spontaneously I had a sister-in-law doing a master's and a friend who's going to start her master's, and we all had kids, and I was like, let's do it. And so I started my master's, and again, it was a really uphill climb. I think a cousin of mine pointed out to me, she was giving me a compliment saying she was really impressed that I'd gone this far because she's like, most people it's an uphill climb to go to school, but because of your learning disabilities, it's an extra climb for you. And yet you still kind of push through and persevere. Um, which, it's funny because to me, this is how I work. It takes, I know it takes me longer to do the same thing as some people, but I don't sit there and think about it because that's just who I am and how I do it. But when, having her point that out made me really reflect like, yeah, you're right. Like it does take me more work than the average person to get to the same result sometimes on some things, particularly academics and things like that. Um, And so that really motivated me. And yeah, so when I did all this stuff, and then, again, I was like, I'm done trying to hit other people's targets of what's good enough and what's appropriate
Mm-hmm.
with school, right? Because you learn all the things they want you to learn. And I'm like, I'm going to do child and youth mental health. And I had a friend get me an intern or an interview for an internship. And I went in, and the lady was horrendous. And she was like, yeah, you're going to cry, and I'm not going to give you more clients until you get your reports right, which the reports are important in the ministry, but they're not important for my graduate work. So she's essentially like, I don't care if you get your hours or not, like, you're going to learn how to do this. And I just left and was like, everything in my body was like, run away, run away. So yeah, I walked out of that going, well, that's not happening. But I need an internship. What am I going to do? And so I ended up going with a friend to I think it's a nonprofit organization, Moving Forward Family Services, and they offer free, low cost, no barrier counseling. Anyways, he runs it more like you're kind of in a private practice, and we had choice, and we could pick and choose and say, like, this is who I
Mm-hmm.
want to work with, this is who I don't want to work with. Um, and so out of that, and that was a great experience. And I was kind of like, oh, I have a choice. I get to pick who I work with, which was a novel concept, because I think we often are just working with whomever is put in front of us, especially if you do government work, right? It's kind of like, this is who you're working with, and just figure it out. And so
Yeah.
I left there, and I had a few clients that came with me. And so I just sort of was like, oh, I'll work one day a week and see these people privately. And anyways, then I went to rent a room at a clinic, which turned into me leaving my job and working full anyway. So it's been unfolded to me going, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so I worked in a clinic for 3 years, and I learned a lot. And yeah, and then I kind of was like, yeah, I'm gonna go off on my own and like do my own clinic and make my own thing happen. And so it just kind of has unfolded. But I think my early life experiences make me sort of a dreamer. And it's like, I like a challenge, and I like to kind of go, how am I going to figure out how to do that? And then I figure it out, and I like to chew on something and kind of go at it.
I love that. I can relate a lot to how you expressed everything. Like, even how you said that you found yourself having these challenges, and you were able to sit there and kind of be like, okay, this is what I want to do. How do I get from here to there, even with the way that I learn, the way that I see the world, the way that I'm showing up now, the and all of the expectations that are happening around me all at the same time. And yeah, so your story is a great one to share, because there are so many people that do have to jump a lot more over a lot more hurdles, to getting to owning their own a business, being an
Right.
entrepreneur. There's so much behind the scenes that we just don't see. And this is why I love this podcast and sharing stories, I should say. That's what I love. Because we often only see the highlight reels on social
Yeah.
media, or we see the fancy websites, we see the automations, we see all these things that look like it's easy, but
Mhm.
behind the scenes to get to that place takes so much other effort and power and determination and
Yeah.
grit and everything that you just sort of expressed with that. And stopping and taking a minute each time to be like, okay, I've come to a fork in the road. Now, where do I go from here? How do I make this work? How do I make this
Yeah.
happen? And each time seeing it as another stepping stone to getting to where we want to get to.
Yeah.
So yeah. And one of the things that you said too is that your passion has unfolded right in front of you, and you continue to harness it and go with it. And I really liked how you said that, because um, going with it is sometimes one of the hardest things for us as humans, is to just kind of be like, okay, this is where this is taking me, because we have these expectations from society. And like you
Hmm.
said too, even just getting the degree and not having choice.
Hmm.
So one of my sort of mantras that I love is life on my terms.
Yeah.
And that's something that has gotten me through, but it took a lot of challenges to
Yeah.
get to this realization of like, I I can do what I'm passionate about, but on my terms. Like,
Yeah.
really? You know?
I
So yeah, I'd love to
I
hear
was mind
your
blown when someone said to me, we were talking about like, you make a profile as a counselor to post publicly about like, this is what I work with and this is what I do. And someone was like, early on, I think as in my practice, and they're like, oh yeah, like I don't put on there that I work with people with anxiety, like, oh, like not my thing. And I was like, wait, we have a choice. And I was like, I could oh yeah, and I was like, I'm not going to work with people that have like just strictly depression because that doesn't work for me. The energy is too low and I get stuck there. And I'm like, but it was like this epiphany of like, I don't have to put that on my profile. I can just leave it off and not do that, right? Or if someone came to me with that, say like, we're not a match, and I think you should go see so and so. They'd be great for you, you know. But yeah, that sort of like autonomy of like, oh, I have choices.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's one thing that has deterred me over the years from doing something that I actually am passionate about. And I would say, even with that, counseling, or actually, and even I would say, like years and years ago, I was encouraged to become a nurse.
Hmm.
And the idea of not having a choice of what
Hmm.
patients I end up having to work with, or what jobs that I would have to do with those patients, I was like, no, no, that's not for me. And night shifts, that's not for me either. Like
Yeah.
I'm awake during the day and asleep at night, and I can't do anything different than that. So I just didn't even look at the idea of nursing any
Hmm.
further because I didn't feel like I would have a choice.
Yeah.
So I thought that's a great thing to highlight, is that sometimes even when we don't think we have a choice, we just need to be a little more curious and
Hmm.
open to seeing that there could be that possibility of choice.
For sure. And I think the piece too, like for me, is I had to come to this place of realization that I don't necessarily go in the same order that a neurotypical person would go. Like I look at my daughter who's neurotypical and the way her brain works, I'm like, wow, you are just so like A equals B equals C. Like you just get it, you're on fire. And I'm like, I look at myself with a problem going, I don't understand it. I'm stuck. But I'll figure out a route around it. It probably wouldn't be what someone neurotypical beside me would do, but I'm like, but hey, I get to where I want to be. Same with building my business. I'm like, this is what I want. I'm okay with taking calculated risks and setting myself up to jump. But I'm not a daredevil at the same time either. I don't just like jump off and do things. I'm like, okay, I can like prep and get myself to a place where I can leave my job or I can do these things. But yeah, just trying to figure out how to get from A to B for me sometimes I feel like is a different route, but that's what I like about being my own boss is it doesn't matter. I am the boss. No one's critiquing me or saying I'm not doing it right. I'm like, whatever, that's the way I'm going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And coming to that place and having the confidence to do it your way, I think is a
Hmm.
huge thing. A lot of people I find don't trust themselves
Yeah.
that they will get to that place, that they will be able to accomplish the goal that they set out to, unless they do it this person's way or
Yeah.
that person's way, and
Right.
not really going inward. Um,
Hmm.
and not to say that people can't get to where they want to go by using someone else's methods. Um, but I think that what happens is we end up getting a little disconnected
Hmm.
from what we're doing because we're not using our sort of trust within
Yeah.
ourselves that
Yeah.
we're making those choices for the right reasons. We're just following the course.
100%. 100%. And then we're like riddled with anxiety because we're like, what if I make someone upset along the way? This is what I see in my practice, right? This fear of like, what if I upset somebody though? You're like, but if you're living your true self, you're not like intentionally being malicious or unkind. You just have a different vision. That's okay, right? Like, how do I lean into that and move with it versus like stuffing it to make everyone else happy?
Exactly. That's one of the things that's, well, in the last couple of years, that's one of my I've had a few sort of big, I don't know, epiphanies, aha moments, like
Mhm.
lessons that I've kind of started to realize and learn. And that's one of them, is just being honest with myself and then being honest with the people around me.
Yeah.
You specialize in one of the things that really stood out to me was trauma and burnout, and
Mm.
also first responders, because one of my best friends was a first responder for many
Mhm.
years, and I always, in the back of my mind, had her in my thoughts about, how to deal with that. But a general term would be trauma because they
Yeah.
deal with that too. You specialize in burnout. Do you have tips for people to basically keep themselves motivated or keep the momentum going when they start to see that burnout is starting to feel a little heavy and come down on them?
Yeah, like, sort of how to counteract that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the first thing I talk about with people, and I think sometimes people that are prone to burnout struggle with maybe boundaries and learning to say no. So I talk about like what are the red flags so that we know for next time, what are the red flags that are leading up to you getting to this place, right? I would be feeling really negative or crying a lot or not sleeping. Like, what are the things so that next time if we start to go down that road, you can start to go, oh, these are my signs that I might need to like pull back sooner because then I can catch it sooner and not get as far down that road, right? But I think the other piece is where can I learn to start saying no or not? And I think for women particularly, it's very hard. We're people pleasers, we have kids, we're multitasking. And so this my mantra that I found really helpful when I was feeling overwhelmed as a young mom was it's not no, it's just not right now. So
Mm.
we can have all the things we want. It doesn't mean we can have them all at once though. Maybe I can't have 6 kids and a huge career because that's too much right now, but 5, 10 years from now, that might be something that's achievable, right? Or starting my own business or whatever it is. It's like, but we have to pace ourselves with what else is going on. Otherwise, we spread ourselves too thin. And so learning how
Mm-hmm.
to just say, no, I can't do that right now and being comfortable in it because I think we think, oh, well, if I say a boundary, I should feel okay. But it's like people say, oh, no, I can't do that. And then they're riddled with guilt and like, oh, I feel so bad and I should have and I'm not doing enough. And it's learning how to go. Sometimes setting a boundary feels yucky, right? Especially if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
used to doing it. So I might have to say no to something. And then I have to realize that as soon as I say it, I'm going to feel yucky. But I can walk away and I can manage that and I can learn to like talk myself through it and get myself to the other side because in the bigger picture, I know that this is what's better for me to have that balance.
Mm.
So
I
yeah, I
love
think
that.
those are key ones, but yeah, the no, it's not no, it's just not right now. It's often like I find that one really helpful because we do have dreams and ambitions, right? But sometimes we have them collide all at once with other periods of times in our life and it's just too much and it's inhuman what we expect ourselves to do in a day. And so a lot of what I do too is going like, let's look at our expectations and kind of saying back to people what they're expecting of themselves and when they hear someone else say it, they're like, oh, yeah, like I wouldn't expect my mom or my friend or my sister to do that. But man, I cannot make a mistake. I have to be on it. I have to do all these things. And just hearing what that sounds like from another person, I think helps people go, oh, okay, maybe my expectations are too high. Like if my bar is up here all the time, and I'm never hitting it, I'm going to feel depressed and frustrated and not good enough. So I talk about like, how do we lower your bar just a little bit so you can hit it more often, so you can feel more successful, so you can feel more like I've got this and have that confidence.
Yes, exactly. I love that. And that's also been one of the biggest sort of things for me is to learn to slow down, which is also lowering that bar of expectations on myself.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, I can fill up what I call a turkey platter super easy. Like I don't just have a dinner plate, I have a turkey platter and then I'm trying to fill it up because I feel like if I can do all this and then that's when, I'll feel successful or
Right.
I've I can call myself a professional or I can use this label or that label or actually feel like I'm a businesswoman. And it's so interesting too that these ideas that we have, and as you mentioned, when when someone else is sharing with us their expectations of themselves, we're like, whoa, no, hold on. Like, do you hear your expectations are not realistic? Like, let's help you with that. But then we turn around and we go have our own high expectations.
It's like we're always willing to offer help to somebody, but God forbid we don't want to ask for it. Right?
Yes, which
Yeah.
is interesting. I feel like that. I mean, I'm talking about women. I do feel like for us, there is so much pressure from the moment that we enter this world. I feel like, and now with like roles used to be so clear in a household
Hmm.
of what the roles were based on gender and everything. And now so many women are trying to do something different than those roles because it doesn't
Right.
feel aligned with them. And yet, by default, it seems like we fall back to feeling like we also have to accomplish those roles as well. And that's also where the dinner plate becomes a turkey platter because we're trying to do
Yeah.
all these different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. I mean, burnout is a hard one and so many people suffer from it, right? I think I look at it, too. Who are we like comparing ourselves to, right? Are we looking at the super high achieving friend or are we just looking at our average friend here, right? Like, with first responders, I find too with like burnout, it's like, well, I find myself like feeling really emotional about these files at work. I'm like, yeah, because you do horrendous work and you're immersed in it every day. Well, yeah, but my colleagues don't cry about it. And I'm like, but that's okay. And I'm like, everyone has this different level of tolerance. And sometimes we go through phases where something touches us more and it's hard. And don't assume your colleagues don't have challenges with their work. They do. It just shows up differently, or they're in a different phase right now than you. And so look at who you're comparing yourself to. Like you're very normal compared to the normal population. What you're upset about is very normal, but you're comparing yourself to people who are highly trained to deal with super yucky things. And so that's not a fair comparison. You know what I mean?
I think that is a great point. And valid like place to discuss it too, because the comparison trap, what's the saying that I try to remind myself to compare brings despair. Like that is something that I've always thought of and I'm like, and I try to like as soon as I get to that place, it's like, Megan, remember to compare brings despair. Like get out of there.
Yeah.
Don't give it another second thought. Like get out of that space.
Yeah.
Um, and it has been a huge, huge work in progress because we often are compared throughout our lives. When we're children, we're compared, whether it's to a sibling or to a cousin or to some other person that our parents want us to aspire to, and
Right.
all the things like, and it's verbalized. It's not just implied sometimes, it's actually verbalized. This person, look what they're doing in their
Yeah.
lives. And also the opposite of that, like we compare to positive things, but we also compare to negative things as well. So if
Mhm.
someone is behaving a certain way or getting in trouble, we will bring that up.
Yeah.
Don't be like that person,
Yeah.
so there's comparison embedded in so many parts of our lives. It's
100%.
yeah, but I think like you were saying and how you were getting through schooling and everything is really just going inward and focusing on how you yourself can get through the challenges to get to the place that you want to go. And that's one of the places that I feel like has been the most helpful for me is like, okay, where am I at? What stage or phase of life am I at?
Yeah.
And does it make sense to have these expectations of where I'm at? And that was even for me, one of the biggest lessons last year was I was doing a lot of markets for another side business I have. And it was taking time away from my child, who is not neurotypical and does require a lot more from me. And that was becoming a hard part because I was starting to feel anxious, even just applying for markets of what was
Right.
going to happen right before the market. during the market and then after the market. And it was no longer feeling good for me to go
Yeah.
to these markets. So I'm like, this isn't working in this phase of my life and this stage. And so I was like, I just not going to do it. And that's again where I was like, okay, but I really love my side business. So how do I make it work? How do I still make it work within the threshold of what's happening under my roof right now?
Yeah.
And was able then to be like, okay, well, choice, autonomy, how do I bring that into my life in this phase and stage? So these are all the questions that I feel like once we slow down, we can actually process and ask ourselves. But if we're on a hamster wheel, it's that piece of slowing down that I feel like we,
Hard.
yeah. So do you have, like, how do you do that when you feel like you're getting into that sort of um, thought process or way of like being on a hamster wheel? Do you have something that you have found that helps you to be like, okay, I see what's happening right now, and I just need to pause to remind myself that I'm getting to that place?
I think again, it goes back to this. What are those red flags for me? Oh, I'm
Mm,
starting to feel really anxious a lot. I'm not sleeping. I'm not being the parent that I want to be. I'm not showing up how I want to as a parent, or maybe, for my clients or for my husband or whatever, right? Like I'm feeling too spread thin. And one of the things I do with my clients and I do it with myself is that like you're saying, that conflict between wanting to do markets and your child. It's like if we stop and go, okay, if I just turn inward and listen to my body, and I think about doing all these markets right now, what goes on in my body? Oh, I just feel tension and stress. I don't feel joy and excitement. I feel this like, ugh, because I know my child's at home struggling and I'm not there. Okay. Now, if I let go of that and say, I'm going to let go of those markets and I'm going to stay home with my child, what goes on in my body? Oh, I can take a breath. I can breathe. I feel lighter. Like our body knows. We're just so used to not listening to it and being up here.
mm,
And so
mhm.
learning how to be like, oh, if I kind of put myself in both those situations, what goes on? Which one feels better? Well, that's where I need to be right now. That's what I need to be focusing on. And then trying to like pull back, right? Okay, my family, I have to remember it's not no, it's not right now. And I'm going to pull back because it's my family right now. I can build this later.
Oh, I love that. And when my children were younger, one of the things that stood out for me was the power of yet. And even with them, that's one thing that I tried to work on with them was like, okay, you're not getting this right now, like you're whatever it might be that they're working on, whether it's like drawing a specific picture. It's not like you said, it's not no, it's just that there's things that need to happen before you can get to that. So no, you can't draw it right now, but let's look at it differently. It's yet. Like you
Yeah,
don't have the skills yet to draw that
right,
specific type of picture or what have you, or create that.
right,
Um,
right.
but we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So yeah, that's, and again, going back to what you're saying about the pausing and checking on the red flags, I think that that has definitely been a tool to help for sure, is going inward and checking with how our body's feeling. And again, we might feel that right now, but in a year from now and practicing all that checking in, we could be in a different phase and stage where we actually are
Yeah,
able to say yes.
absolutely,
So
right.
yeah,
And what's
yeah,
the point of doing it if I'm going to be riddled with anxiety while I'm doing it? Like, then I'm not enjoying it. And again, I'm not showing up in my life how I want to show up. I'm just ticking the boxes to say that I'm doing all these things, which is great, but I'm burnt out and overwhelmed and not super happy. Okay, well, is it worth it?
yeah, exactly. Checking the boxes. Yeah. That's exactly how I lived most of my life until, just a few years ago. It was literally just checking the boxes all the way. And then all of a sudden, same thing. It was just like I was lying there and I'm like, wow, how did I get here? First of all, because I don't really know how I got here. It's a bit of a blur. I checked all the boxes. I don't know if I enjoyed checking all the boxes, but I just did it. And now I don't really know what to do with my life because I've
Right.
gone and checked all the boxes that I had on my list.
But I'm not necessarily happy, but I did the things I'm supposed to do, but I
Yeah.
didn't do the things I wanted to do, or I didn't show up how I wanted to show up, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's what life's about, is learning how to show up how we want to show up so we can live in the joy of life and the experience and the fun of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is something to be said sometimes for doing the hard thing and getting to that place and taking a little bit of a risk. But if we're constantly sitting in anxiety where we're not even present or able to be present,
Hmm.
then we're going to be so disconnected from whatever it is that we're doing. That's
Yeah.
what I've noticed with myself anyways, is and then I don't have an attachment to that. Um, and then I'm like, that wasn't actually so great.
I
Why
think
didn't I
anxiety in
listen to
itself is
myself?
fine. It's a calculated anxiety. Like, I know that this next venture is going to be scary and stressful, but like I'm prepared for it and I have the space in my life to do it versus I'm just cramming it in and then I'm anxious.
Yes, and I think that's what my thought process was about bringing up like doing something that is hard. Like, yes, it's important sometimes to push ourselves a little bit, but like you said as well, it's like it's the acceptance around it. It's the acceptance and it's the knowing that it is going to be hard. I'm accepting that it's going to be hard because the idea of coming out of there makes me feel good
Yeah.
versus the other opposite of it.
Yeah. I like the idea of the challenge. It's anxiety provoking but exciting versus like I'm locked down in anxiety and fear because I'm overwhelmed. I'm not coping. I'm not ready for this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. One of the things that, although we've covered a few tips and everything, but if someone is, say, has gone through that, they've accepted that there's going to be some challenges and they're fighting through all that, they're still experiencing some joy out of what they're the challenge that they chose to go on through. What are some tips for just keeping up with the momentum and the motivation through those challenges?
I think it's about trying to have, find balance when you can. I think when we're doing all that stuff, there's a lot going on. And so, how do I remember to schedule in like some time off? I think, especially for entrepreneurs, we don't have 9 to 5 office hours and we can become obsessed with our work because any given moment, oh, I can just post on social media. I can just answer that email. I can do this. I can do that. But we're always on then. And we have to give our brain a break so that we can decompress, so that we can regroup and kick butt later. And so, how do we like consciously be like, no, tonight is movie night, like, or date night, or whatever? Like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not going to talk about work. I'm not going to check my email. Like, I have timers, I have my emails. My work emails don't send in the evening and on weekends. So, I have to literally go into it, right? Because all those little things on our phone jog our mind to always be connected. And so, how do I start to pull back from the connection and be like, nope, if a client reaches out to me at 8 o'clock on a Saturday, I don't need to respond. I don't even need to know
Mm.
it's there. But you know what I
Hmm.
mean? So that I'm not dipping into work constantly. I'm giving myself that full break off so that I can really manage all the balls in the air when I am taking on a lot. Because we do take on a lot consciously sometimes, but how do I go in knowing what I need to survive it?
Mm, hmm. I love that. Years ago, Apple came out with this whole like you can put these like timers on certain apps, and I was actively really trying very hard to reduce my screen time because it was quite shocking to see how much I was on the screen. So I put on these timers for all these different apps, and when I've reached my limit, it grays out. Well,
Okay.
after so long of doing that, I would bypass the timer. So now it's interesting because the other day my daughter's like, why do you have that on there if you're always saying ignore timer? I was like, oh no,
Right.
I need to, I think I'm spending more time pressing ignore timer than I am actually like
Yeah.
actively on the thing anyways, but oh my goodness. having those is, I agree. I think we've gotten into this habit of allowing other people's sort of urgency become our urgency. And I'm totally guilty of doing that. But again, that also is going back into setting those boundaries,
Mhm.
and being like, okay, no, my boundary is that I'm not going to drop what I'm doing because I feel good in the moment for showing up for you. However, afterwards, I'm a little bit, feeling drained or what have you.
Yeah.
And it's noticing those things and then being able to say no the next time and be like, remember how you felt the
Yeah.
last time you said yes, but it was coming from a different place and you crossed your own boundary and how that made you feel. So
And it's tricky, I think, too, like people with their watches that send text messages. Like I have people in session and they're crying, and all of a sudden they're looking at their phone because someone's sending a message. I mean, occasionally there's reasons to like, I'm sorry, my child's having a rough day or something at school. Fine. But it's like, oh, it's just work. They want me to work overtime. And I'm like, but you're burnt out and you're not going to recover if you cannot disconnect. They can wait an hour. Why do we have to have them on in your hour? Where do we put that boundary in to say I'm in therapy or I'm having a nap or I'm spending family time? I'm just going to turn it off. Like I don't need to have every text message and I don't need to respond. Like you're saying, I don't need to respond. I spend so much time talking with people about just because someone texts you doesn't mean you have to respond. Get it the next day. Like turn all your notifications off at a certain time and just have a break, right? But people are like, but I have to. We get into this like sense of urgency and I have to respond. And it's like, no, it's just a bad habit.
and it's so true. It really is a habit. And years ago, uh, you know, if someone texted me, I would be like, okay, and I would stop everything and like if it was a big long text because they're going through something, I would stop everything that I was doing and be like, okay, I'm going to focus on this.
Hmm.
My time is now in this. Now I'm invested in this because I'm reading it, so I better reply.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to understand and to learn that I can either choose not to read it, or if I do choose to read it, I can choose not to respond.
Hmm.
I can also choose to say I've read it. When I have more time to respond,
Yeah.
I will respond. We have so many choices. We just need to remind ourselves that we do actually have those
Yeah.
choices.
100%. Yeah. And who did am I out for dinner with my husband when I'm getting this text message? And now I'm ignoring him because, oh, Jane's having a really hard time. I just have to read this quickly. Well, now I'm totally disconnected from what was going on with us and I'm not present for this person. Right. And it's rude.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think it's etiquette around all of that. Also, I think I have my own sort of etiquette that I like dinner in the house with the family, zero phones. Like they're
Yeah.
not even, I don't want to see a phone at the table. And my
Hmm.
husband has two phones, one personal, one for work. He always has them. And I'm like,
Put them
can
down.
you look, yeah, and it seems the table was my boundary, and it's been good. He's been good. He's showed up to dinner without the
Yeah.
phones nearly every single time, so that's good. But other
Yeah.
than that, it's like there doesn't seem to be another break. Like meal times, it seems easy. Everyone's focused on eating most of the time anyways.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like I saw this thing, I can't remember where I saw it, but it was this like someone who was kind of pointing out phone use. And they're like, what does it say when you go out for dinner with a friend and you put your phone face up on the table in front of you? Like, I'm here with you until something comes through my phone. But then sometimes we're polite about it and we put it face down on the table. So I'm still with you, but I'm still sort of attached to my phone versus I've turned it off, put it in my purse or left it in the car and it's not even present in the conversation. It feels different when you think about it that way, right? It's like, oh, now you're not distracted at all. And maybe take your watch off if you have one of those watches.
I do. It's funny, like I'm not attached to the watch, but I do find that um when I do have it on, it's like, oh, Oh,
Yeah.
and it was actually a couple weeks ago. I went to some like yoga class, and I I had it on and it was vibrating. I don't have notifications like sound on my phone or anything, but on the watch it does vibrate. And I'm trying to enjoy this yoga class so that I can just like, just be in the moment and be with myself and take that time for sort of just being present and taking my self-care moment. And I'm getting these messages that are, I'm like, I don't have time for this. I did. I ripped the watch off, but threw it because I was like, I had to do it that way because I knew if I didn't take it off, it's such a habit to look that I just
Yeah.
continue looking, even if I told myself, don't respond, don't look. I literally had to.
But your brain's hijacked as soon as it vibrates,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, how do we do self care and burnout recovery when we're constantly allowing ourselves to be hijacked out of a moment where we're supposed to be present, but we're not allowing ourselves to be present because we have our phone in our pocket, we have our watches on, whatever, right? Like, we're not really in the moment. Then we're in and out of the moment, but we're not recuperating.
Exactly. And exactly. And if we're not recuperating, we're just the cycle will just continue if we don't take that time and allow ourselves, our minds, our bodies, however we need to be to recuperate, then it's just going to be an ongoing cycle.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But clickbait, yeah. Social media and stuff, all that stuff, it's so like, oh, default, 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 right? And it's like, it's amazing when we really stop and start looking. How often do I have noticing that impulse? How often do I have an impulse to hit that? Holy, like every 30 seconds.
It's awful.
And I
I
say all
have.
this and I'm at fault for it too. I do all
Yeah.
this stuff, right? It's just starting to be aware of the stuff like, where am I? Oh, I'm not doing well. I'm really tired, anxious, burnt out. Now I really need to start paying attention to all this stuff because this is impacting me right now. Maybe last week it was fine. Maybe last week I had space for it and it didn't bother me.
Last week I had space and capacity for doing all these different things, but this week I don't. Well, what's going on this week? What's wrong with me this week?
Yeah, it's that
It's
adjusting expectations, right? I think that's where we don't. It's like, yeah, sometimes I have a week and I rock it out and I have great sleeps, then I'm on my A game and it's great. And then other weeks I'm dragging myself, like, I don't want to get out of bed. I'm so tired, right? That's fine. That's the cycle of life. We're never always on our A game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having patience and everything for ourselves and everything, and like you said too, sort of just not focusing but acknowledging the flags that are coming up, and then
Mhm.
steering ourselves in, you know a direction that we need to go so that we don't um, go over the edge, and just
Yeah.
kind of like bring ourselves back down and be more present and slow down. I know for myself, um, I can even caffeine changes for me. Like one day I can drink a whole pot. It doesn't do anything. And then the next day my heart is racing and pounding and I'm like, what is going on? What is happening inside me? And then it's like, you did just drink a whole pot of coffee. Like,
Right.
it's so interesting. But yeah, but now I'm aware, and now that I have the awareness that sometimes caffeine will have a different effect on me depending on what's going on as
Yeah.
well, then it's like, oh, I think it's just the caffeine. We're okay.
Yeah.
We're okay.
Wait it out. We'll be to the other side eventually.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to go a little bit back into sort of your roadblocks to for this journey that you've been on, because one of the things that you did bring up was not being neurotypical. So in a lot of language, people would use neurodivergent. Is that what you would say
Yeah.
for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so how do you find being an entrepreneur and business owner, and that how have you found that you've been able to still move through all the challenges?
I think again, it's that piece of I don't think I do it the same way that the person beside me would do it. I
Mhm.
kind of just I kind of think I'm a bit of a dreamer, and I kind of get an idea and then I'm like, okay. And I just start, I don't necessarily, I think some people are like, this is my plan and they have a vision and they have steps. And I'm like, I just kind of jump in one step at a time and like start chipping away, chipping away at it to get to my bigger goal. I don't have this elaborate laid out plan of all the things I'm going to do per se. Um, yeah, I think just sort of jumping in and trying it different ways, right?
Has there have you had mentors and people that have helped you that have also had similar challenges as you that you have been able to sort of bounce different ideas off of? And what kind of support have you had throughout?
I think, it's different. I think like through my education and stuff, I definitely had the tutors, the supports, the things like I had that stuff to help guide me because there's more structure to that and what you're learning and how you're learning it. I think as an adult, um, no, I think that is something I've struggled with. Like, I'm like, now I think in the last year or so, I do have more like colleagues and friends that are building their own practices and doing the same thing. But until a year or so ago, I didn't really have that community. And so I would just kind of like siphon bits of information off people here and there and Facebook groups. And I think I started building my ideas a long time ago before I even got momentum. So I kind of like created this knowledge base slowly over time so that when I was ready to take off, I kind of had a sense of what I was doing.
Mm.
But it's been challenging not necessarily having role models to be like, hey, how do I do it? Like, what do I do? I think the good thing in my field is we all go to school to be counselors and not business people. And so there's a lot of counselors who have businesses who have created trainings on how to build the business. And so that's what I started leaning on in the last year of like, what do I need to know? Okay, there's a training on this, like how to manage your finances and your business. Okay, great. I'm going to take that and learn how to do that. And then that piece of I do now have friends who are neurodivergent as well, who have practices. Some are bigger than mine. And so we're really great resources and we get together regularly and kind of, brainstorm ideas or problem solve together. Or what did you do? How do you do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the words that you brought up, which I think is key, is community and finding people that you can relate to, and whether they've gone through exactly the same challenges or anything, just having people around you that you feel safe with to also
Mhm.
have in your corner and support you, I think is so important. I know we don't all have the answers, and I don't, there's that saying that we're not meant to do this alone, and I think that that is something that we struggle with because, again, going back to what has been, I think, also for women is the pressure to figure things out and do things alone. So it's like, where's that village? Where's
Yeah.
that? We say it takes a village for a family and to raise our kids. It also takes a village to do all these other things in life as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I did my master's program. It was 100% online. And so I think that was something when I got out of school, I really was like, I don't have this strong village because everyone was virtual all over the place. And so I made a couple friends, but I didn't have like a tight community or class that I went through school with and graduated with. And I really missed that piece. Like I was like, that sucks because that's really what I want. And I've ended up reconnecting with a couple ladies who I worked with in my 20s. We worked at similar jobs and we'd all gone on our own paths, but we've all got our masters, all started private practices, and we connected on social media by accident. And now we're like a really good community for each other. And so that has probably been the most helpful for me to just sort of give me this place to like throw out ideas, get ideas, brainstorm, and that safe place like you're talking about. Like, who can I go to that wants to listen to me talk about my struggles and can give me feedback?
Yeah, yeah. And feedback is another important thing too. And so having the safe people and the safe space to be able to one ask for feedback, I think it's really important for us as humans
Mhm.
to be able to see and feel other people's perspectives when it comes to what questions we have and what we're asking. And sometimes that is hard, is to hear someone else's um, feedback if we take things personal or something.
Yeah.
But
But I think
when
too, we
we're
all sort of have a shared vision of building our private practices. And that's where it's like, okay, we all kind of have the same questions. We're all going through the same phases. Some of us are at different phases, but we're either going through it or have been through it, or we've talked to somebody who's been through it and we have other ideas. And so, yeah, that community is huge.
yeah, I've I've been able to find community in so many different ways, and one of them is doing the podcast. And every time someone comes on and I'm hearing a story, there's so much things that are relatable, but there's so many things that I feel like because it's a different perspective of the same challenge, it can hit differently for people. And that's one thing. We can listen to the same things over and over, but depending on also where we're at, in what
Yeah,
stage or phase of our life, it will land differently. We might have heard the
100%.
same thing 10 years ago from somebody else, but we weren't ready to even hear that at that time anyways. That's the other interesting thing about being in community is you get different perspectives, and I think there's something to be said about having people from different upbringings as well into it, because I think it brings a different level of thought,
Hmm.
different level of feedback, different level of answers to questions and things. So, and I think it's all important to listen to and to hear as well. And we can
Yeah,
all sort of take it or leave it. And that's our choice that we have when someone is
yeah.
sharing their way of doing things. We can take it or leave it. So we've talked a lot about the flags and checking in and everything. What are some surprising connections that you've had over the course of your journey?
What do you mean by that?
Have you made connections with like is it so when I first wrote that question, it's I've made connections with different people along my path that I was like, "Oh, I don't think I would have ever made that connection with you had I not been doing this or had I not hit this goal of mine." It can also be just connections as far so it can be relationship connections or just connections in seeing that going through a challenge can bring us to a success story kind of thing.
Hmm. What connections have I mean, I think one of the connections I've made or realizations, I mean, as a counselor, we know people are resilient and all this stuff, but like it still amazes me, which is what I like about my job is it's always different, but like seeing just how much people can change. I have people come in horrible mental states who are really unstable and really, really struggling. And when we have the time to put in the work, like, I'm always surprised at, like it's like you meet somebody in this horrible place, so you don't know what they're like when they're normal. Like, is this their normal place, or what are they like when they're healthy, right? I don't know. I don't know what their baseline is. And then to work with them for months or years and watch them transform and come to this other place, you're like, wow, like you can reflect back and go, you were in such a dark place. Like seeing how far you've come. And so just like the resiliency of people and like how far they can come, um, and what they can get through on their own. I mean, people are like, I couldn't do this without you. And I'm like, you do it without me all the time. You see me 1 hour, maybe once a week, if we're lucky, right? And yet you manage all this really hard stuff in between on your own. Maybe it doesn't look pretty, maybe it's not easy, but you're getting through it, right? Until we get to this better place. And so yeah.
Yeah, well, I can see, and that would be so interesting um, to have it on the outside. Because most of the
Mhm.
time we're on the inside. And when we are like, wow, I can't believe that was where I was in that place of my life and now I'm here, we forget all that sort of in between stuff because
Yeah.
we're out of it and now we're like,
The
I'm
bad
not
stuff's
looking
over, so
back.
we forgot
Y-
how bad it was. But even just
Yeah.
seeing the physical shift in people, like just the strain on their face, and like people can look like completely different people as they start to like settle and get into a better place. You're like, wow, like it just they can, yeah, they can look like totally different people.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for that answer. Um, is there anything or any other points that you want to touch on about your practice or about your journey or anything? What goals do you have? Any dreams or goals? Because you said that you're a bit of a dreamer. So do you have do you have anything? Do you set yearly goals or do any kind of that sort of thing and then work towards it throughout the year?
Not yearly. I think my goals just evolve as I evolve. I mean, I recently just made a big move from the mainland to the island. And so that's been really good. But I've been kind of holding myself back professionally because I knew the move was coming. And so now I've got my own office space. I've got it all set up. And so I think my next goal, like from a business stance, is to bring on associates and kind of like get more people in here and helping more people. Um, I think personally, it's just that my goal is always to find that balance between family and work and life. And how do I keep it status quo, right? And not go too far one way or the other because it is really easy to get like excited about work and I want to jump in and I want to work more and I want to see more people because I love doing that. But then my family suffers or I'm tired and my husband's a shift worker. So, that's a hard piece too. And so how do I temper my expectations with what I can do right now at this phase in my life so that I can show up for my kids too? Because I don't want to be the grumpy mom or the one that says, no, we can't do that. No, I'm too tired. No, I don't want to. I have work to do. I want to be the yes mom, that's like, yeah,
Mm,
let's go to the park. Let's do the thing. Let's try that out. And so, you have to have a certain amount of energy for that too.
for sure. Well, it's interesting that you even put it that way because I find that's how I try to schedule is to be the yes mom. So when I look at my schedule, I'm like, okay, so now I've got this filled up and this filled up. Where have I allowed for myself to be able to say yes? Yes
Yeah.
to play dates. Yes to having kids over, yes to going out and having an adventure or doing that kind of thing. Where do I get to say yes?
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of how I look at my schedule. I used to try all the different time blocking or task, blocking. And now it's just like fill it up, but allow time to say yes for things.
I've learned the hard way. I hit burnout a few times in my life, and I'm like, I just don't want to keep repeating this. Like, how do I? And so it has to be very conscious. Otherwise, I will fall back into that. And I'm like, I do not want to get there again. Like, it is not a fun place to be. And so, yeah, like, where's the balance?
Yeah, exactly. Well, same. And falling into burnout is what actually changed the trajectory of what I do and
Hmm.
how I show up because it was an awful place. It was a really awful place. And once I got out of that one, I did start looking for the red flags and I was
Yeah.
able to start, but it still took so much practice.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's years and everybody's different. Some people can, get out of burnout and just that's that and don't easily fall back. I also can easily fall back into things. Like I said, I have a turkey platter. I'm not very good at portioning out my dinner. Really like something, it's going on there is a
Yeah.
really big portion of it. Um, but I have had to learn to scale things back because of that as well. I think
Yeah.
burnout, I think, and it shows up differently as
Hmm.
well. So how it showed up years ago, it doesn't show up the same anymore. But that's also
Hmm.
again because the practice of watching for it, I think,
How
and
far down the
trusting.
rabbit hole do you get now, right? Now that you
Yeah.
know that you can get there, I think it's easier to catch it. That's why I talk about the red flags, right? If we can catch it sooner, the climb out is going to be so much easier. Whereas if we're down that hole and in the well, like we're stuck. And that's a really hard climb. And I have clients I've seen for like my longest client with burnout was 2 years that I saw her before she could go back to work. And even then it was still, very sensitive because it was so deep, her burnout, right? And on so many different levels.
Well, that and that exactly. I could talk about burnout forever. But, but that's
Anyone that's
because,
been there knows what it's like and is like, I don't want to go back. And then I think people
right?
get fearful too of like, I've been burnt out. And then we get anticipatory anxiety about what if I get there again? Like I'm afraid to do something because I'm afraid I'll end up back there. And it's like, well, no, it's again, how do we have that balance, right? So we can do that thing, but not spiral out of control.
Anticipatory anxiety was exactly what happened. Like once I felt like I was out of the rabbit hole, then it was like, okay, but now how do I keep myself out? And how do I not go back? And I couldn't touch the idea of going back to the career that I had
Yeah.
for quite a while because of that. But then that's when I was like, but I actually do, I did love my job. I
Yeah.
loved what it, I loved a lot of things about it. So how can I live a life on my terms, enjoying something that I love to do and not go back into burnout? How
Yeah.
can I do that? Um, and and it also came with a lot of self-worth work
Yeah.
and believing that I have value, even if I don't work 14 hours a day, I still
Yeah.
bring value, and that I'm worth having this career and doing what I love, but also on my terms as well, and that's okay to ask for what we need. And I think the red flags and understanding. It's taken so much practice because people pleasing.
Yeah.
Like, even if you work for yourself, even if you own your business and you have tendencies of people pleasing, it can be easy to start saying yes when you really want to or should have said no.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how do I backtrack if I find myself saying yes and I'm like, oh, shoot, I wasn't going to do that. How do I get out of this now?
Yeah.
Right? How do I allow myself to change my mind and say, I thought that was okay, but I've actually realized it's not going to work for me, right? Like,
I do that with my kids because sometimes I say yes or sometimes I say no. And if usually when I say no about something, it's usually because I'm in some sort of state of anxiety about it, about something, whether it's my own stuff or whatever. And then I'll sit there and I'll think, oh, I don't feel good that I said no about that.
yeah.
I need to change my mind.
Hmm.
And then I'll explain, I thought about it and that actually does sound really fun. And I'm going to say yes now. Or the opposite could be true as well. Like I say yes to something and then it's like, why did I agree to that? I should have said no.
Right?
5 kids coming over on this day that I've already booked myself solid just does not feel good anymore. Like, let's
Yeah.
change this.
Yeah.
Um, and for the most part, because I do change my mind and I explain why I've changed my mind, the kids are understanding. They're a lot more understanding. They might be
Hmm.
disappointed,
Yeah. But
but
then it's
we've
that piece, right?
practiced.
Can people sit with that disappointment? Oh, I've disappointed them, right? That's where people go, oh, I feel really bad. Okay, I'll change my mind. I'll make it happen. Right. And it's like, no, no, it's okay to disappoint them. It's okay. They can't have a play date. Their life was not like going to be ruined for it. Give them 5 minutes. They'll be playing with something and forget about it. Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing, even well with work, you know, those red flags come up. Or I've said yes to something and then the red flags. And then I'm like, ooh, okay, how do I renegotiate
Hmm.
this? And what do I need? What do I need out of this? Do I just need to say, nope, sorry, can't do anything at all? Or do I need to say, I can do that, but on these terms?
Yeah.
And being able to, yeah. So I think that's important is being able to change our mind and being okay with um how other people respond as well,
Hmm.
because that's not up to us anyways.
Yeah. It's that piece. I talk to people a lot about like, it's okay if someone's upset about it. That's their feeling to have, and it's not your feeling to fix. They can be disappointed that you can't help them with whatever it is. And learning how to just let them be that way. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to keep talking about it. You can just say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. That's okay. And
But
then they can be the grown up and they can deal with that on their own and move on. And if they don't, then there's someone maybe that has unhealthy boundaries. And then that's a different conversation, right?
right, totally. I know sometimes I have to be like, okay, just say what you need to say. They are adults. They are
Yeah.
adults. They will get through it. Whatever comes up for them is for them. It's not for me. It's okay.
Yeah.
I have to say that about my husband sometimes. Like, it's okay if he's upset about something because, but yeah, he's a shift. Well, he works away a lot as well.
Okay.
And so it makes things really interesting being sort of an entrepreneur and then having the dynamics shift and change.
A part-time
Um,
single mom who sometimes has help.
yeah, right. So, and those are all things that I've had to sort of understand and realize as well is that, okay, well, he's gone. This is kind of what my life is like. When he's home, this is what my life is like. And that's the other piece of it too, is I don't always know when he's home, but
Okay.
I do want to be able to say yes to
Hmm.
spend time when he is home. So that's another piece for me as well is looking at the schedule from that aspect and finding balance. But again, it changes so much that
Right.
sometimes I'm like, is there even such thing as balance?
I don't think there is, but I think it's always striving to have connection, right? I may
Yeah.
not have balance, but I can always try to prioritize having connection because that's what's going to make this marriage and my life sustainable, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Prioritizing connection. Um, I think that's and connection with self too, I think
Hmm.
is huge. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything. I think that there's lots of different takeaways and things that the listeners can apply for themselves. And I think that some of the ways that you explained it, the red flag, I know for me that really stuck out for me. And I know that's something that I'm going to look at. And every time I get to that space, I'm going to be like, red flag, red flag. So I really appreciate everything that you have come to today for this conversation. And thank you so much for showing up and just being part of this experience.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very cool experience. I'm glad I took the chance and did it.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Anchor Your Dreams. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. A big thank you to our incredible guest for sharing their wisdom and insights. If you resonated with today's episode and want to explore more about turning your dreams into reality, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We have a lineup of amazing guests and valuable content coming your way. Don't forget to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Share your thoughts, insights, and your own journey using the hashtag #AnchorYourDreams. Head over to our website at meghanmcquillan.com in the podcast section, where you'll find the show notes, resources, and information about upcoming episodes. Before we wrap up, I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you. Your support means the world to me, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Remember, anchored dreams become goals. Anchored goals become results. Until next time, dream big and stay anchored.